Well, welcome everyone. Welcome, Namali.
Hi, Lee. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Good. So, what are we doing
Excellent.
today?
Well, we're continuing our exploration into how to integrate the levels of spiral dynamics, so the value memes, into our daily lives. And we've already covered an introduction to spiral dynamics and the beige, or in integral theory, infrared level of development or value meme. So today we're moving on to purple, or within the integral model, magenta. So can you perhaps introduce us to that value meme?
Sure. Yeah. So, we already talked about beige, which we have been taught as the first stage. That was the express self, although there isn't really much of a sense of a self yet in beige. And in that stage of basic survival, I guess humans realize that it's hard. It's hard to survive alone. And there comes a time in the beige stage or the infrared stage that begins to feel like I would do much better if I join with other people. I don't believe that it's a conscious choice that one makes, but that sense of the lone survivor, the lone hunter gatherer, just begins to realize the value of being in a group. We are now entering a cool color, as we explained in our first spiral intro video. Cool colors are the more collectivist, communal value systems. I guess you can say purple is the very first system that is emerging that begins to really look like how humanity looks like now. No one can really survive all by themselves. Or you can, but it would be extremely difficult to try to survive all by oneself. This is the stage that is seen in small clans, usually smaller groups of people. And it's truly an indication that we look to one another as a system. We do things together. We begin to create rituals that bond us together. We have almost a certain sense of a magical connection to the group, as well as our elders and our ancestors, and everything begins to feel kind of spiritual. This stage, if you're not using any colors, the word that I guess captures the essence of this stage is magic. So it's also referred to as the magical stage. There are lots of rituals, rites of passage, ceremony, sacred oaths, blood oaths. The roles in the group even can feel quite rigid. There's a strong hierarchy in the sense of the tribe leader is who you look up to, and you have to appease to the leader. And sometimes who you're appeasing to or who you're trying to please are whoever you think are the gods and goddesses. And it could be the rain, the hurricanes, the sun, that tree that's out there, the flowers. There's very strong connection to nature. And you are enchanted by nature. You are afraid of nature. So, all these ceremonies, rituals, and the tribal leaders' guidance, they're all towards how do we survive as a group in accordance with natural laws. There's godliness everywhere, there's sacredness everywhere. From, why is it raining today to why is it not raining? Maybe we need to do a rain dance. So everything is seen as meaningful in its natural arising, in a sort of a very innocent way. There's a lot of imagination in this stage. There is also fear. There's a lot of fear that you could make your tribal leader angry, and your leaders could kick you out of the tribe, which means you will be thrown right back into the chaos of the beige system of having to do it alone, being thrown to the wolves, and you don't want that. So you really do everything you can to belong. This is the first time in culture that I guess we begin to see and really value that sense of belonging. Yeah, I'll just stop at that. And then maybe we can speak about where we see purple now. How can we integrate purple? So what might you add, Lee?
Well, that's a great introduction, Amali. And I would add that perhaps to give an impression of the perspective that human beings have at that level of development, so at the magical level, purple or a magenta level. One of the examples that I find personally very illustrative is that in the South Pacific Sea, particularly around the Second World War, there were island tribes who were still living, let's say, predominantly from a perspective of purple magenta. And they would see the Allied forces landing cargo planes on their islands, on landing strips, of course, for the war effort. And in on some islands, what happened was there originated these so-called cargo cults. The tribes would see these cargo planes landing with all sorts of material goods, food, and all sorts of supplies. And what some of these cargo cults did was they would build runways of their own. So just dig sort of a runway-like structure in the earth, and then put torches beside the fake runway. They would build fake planes from wood, and they would construct radios from sticks and things like that. And they would basically act the way the Allies, the Allied soldiers were acting. And they would try to have a cargo plane manifest itself and land on their fake airstrip. That's, I think, a way that illustrates the magical thinking of this value meme, of this level of development, where cause and effect are not perceived very clearly. And sometimes at this level of development, we can take action that doesn't make any sense from a rational perspective, but that makes a lot of sense from a magical perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. It's pre-rational. So starting with beige, purple, red, and also blue to a large degree is considered pre-rational. So decisions aren't made with much logic, and that's a perfect example of that.
Yes, indeed. So if we look at the historical emergence of purple as a value meme or level of development within the human species, then Gerhard Lenski, one of the people who looked at phases of societal development, estimated that the purple level of development evolved around between 50 and 15,000 years ago, and was characterized technologically by the use of digging equipment to create forest farms in small forest gardens with a small tribe of people. That's sort of the emergence of that structure of consciousness. And we could also say that we then still see and experience that same perspective in our daily lives as modern human beings in relation to the way we, for instance, interact with ancestors and the way we think about our own heritage and our own family structures and things like that.
Yeah, we can continue to talk a little bit about where we see this sort of magical way of thinking, behaving in today's world. It's still seen in some of the tribal communities in the Amazon or in the African continent, but also very much in like sports teams. They have their rituals and the lucky color they want to wear, or lucky charms. And I don't want to sort of offend anybody, but I often feel like astrology to me sometimes sounds like purple. It's like although most astrologists will not agree with me, but there's a sort of a magical way in which there's an auspicious time, for example. I know in Sri Lanka, for example, where I come from, there's a lot of magical beliefs about, oh, if this is your new house, there's an auspicious time at which you should enter the house looking at the east. what's the lucky color you should wear, what's the auspicious color, or things like that. But we also sometimes feel like it's really available, freely available to be seen in movies like Harry Potter, Avatar. I think these movies become so popular because we can connect with that sense of enchantedness and magic and imagination. It's so within our DNA, even though we have long past it and have become modern, postmodern humans. It sort of runs through our veins, I think, that we seek out a certain sense of safety and a certain sense of belonging in this very almost primitive way of valuing life, valuing relationships and who's around us. I might also say the purple stage doesn't quite have a sense of your immediate family in the way a later stage such as blue amber would have. In purple, it feels it's really you kind of have children and you could even sacrifice your children. I think if there's a terrible thing happening and the tribe leader says you have to sacrifice a child, they wouldn't hesitate to do that. You want to appease the gods, and if your child is what is going to be is required as a sacrificial lamb, then you're going to do that. Anytime we feel a little bit of superstition, I think maybe like, oh, you don't want to see a black cat, or you're waiting for the signs, looking for the lucky or looking for the right signs, waiting for the signs. I also think Halloween has a lot of purple in it, which all the kids and like you don certain costumes and you feel like you take that role on. And that's a very kind of a purple thing to do. Little kids will put on a little cape and they'll feel like I can fly. I remember something very clearly from my own life for the purple stage when when we would be traveling in the car, I'd be sitting in the back and I would look out and see the moon coming with us. The moon I would really believe as a child that the moon was coming with us because as the car travels, the moon looks like it's coming at the exact same speed. And I would literally believe that the moon was coming with us. How wonderful. It's like, the moon is coming to my cousin's house. So those kinds of things are really sweet about purple. I guess I would be concerned that in this modern day and age, some conspiracy theories have a purplish tone to it and flavor to it. I look at some of the things QAnon believers say, and I find it hard to believe that in today's day and age, some of these QAnon believers really truly believe certain things.
There are very many historical examples. For instance, if you look at the Romans, then they used to carry chickens with them before battles. And the idea was that they needed to know whether the signs were auspicious, so advantageous. And they would then release the chickens and then spread chicken feed on the ground. If the chickens ate, then that was a good omen and the battle could proceed and would be in favor of the Romans. And if the chickens did not eat, then that was a bad sign and they had to postpone the battle because otherwise the Romans would be defeated. And another thing about the Romans, which is also interesting, is that for the wealthy nobility in Rome, they would have beeswax death masks made. So they would, if somebody died in their family, they would place beeswax over the face of the deceased, and they would then keep the wax masks in their home, which would then, of course, reflect the facial features of the person who died. And then during processions, people would wear those masks so the deceased ancestors would be present in the procession as a sort of a channeling of those deceased people.
Yeah, and as I was listening, I had completely forgotten about this, but this was a very purple thing to do, which happens a lot in Sri Lanka still. But I think it happens anywhere. It's when you feel completely helpless. when you feel that you are completely out of control, that there's nothing you can do, we can really just do magical things because we're wanting someone to be cured of cancer or something. So when my dad many years ago was diagnosed with cancer, and as he was going through cancer treatments, I remember I would do anything that somebody would say to me, "Oh, you need to go to that temple. Make sure that you're there before the sunrise. And you need to take rice mixed with oil, made into little balls, and you need to feed it to the crows." And just things like that. And I would be like, absolutely, I'll do it because I'm doing it to save my dad from dying, and I was in my mid-20s. So a very modern living system and person for the most part, but I would just do anything because I felt so helpless. And I remember in Sri Lanka, there is this belief that if you want to pray for somebody, this was in the Christian community, there were people who would make candles to the height of the person that you were trying to bless. And you would then take that candle, you would have this person make this candle. And so if it was for my dad, it would have been a nearly 6-foot candle that I never did this, but I remember very wanting to. So, and there were particular churches that you would go to, and there would be a priest who would bless that candle, and you would light that candle, and perhaps you wait until the whole candle was gone, or I don't know. There's just these ways in which when we feel helpless, that we start going into magical thinking because it helps you calm down in some ways. You feel that I'll do whatever I can, even if it means waking up at 4:30 in the morning and making rice and mixing my rice with oil and taking it to this Hindu temple. That was a Hindu temple, I remember. And with the Buddhist temple, which I was very used to going, I just took part every evening without a doubt to these different ceremonies that were happening there, because it made me feel better somehow. So yeah. It makes me also want to talk a little bit about just little things that we take for granted, but we all just somehow want to know. For example, I think fortune cookies. Everybody wants to somehow open up the fortune cookie and read the little thing that's inside it. Like if you go to a Chinese meal. Does this happen in the Netherlands? Like if you go to a Chinese meal, do they serve fortune cookies?
Sometimes they do. Sometimes they do, yes.
Yeah. Like over here, it's a given. Like pretty much any Chinese restaurant, at the end of your meal, they bring a little plate of fortune cookies, and it's funny. And, of course, you have funny games around it also, but it's really fun. And honestly, I have one that I think really spoke to me one day, which I don't even remember, but it's still in my wallet. Like I saved it. So yeah, you just have these things that you just somehow want to believe in.
I was going to say, speaking about Chinese restaurants, many Chinese shops and restaurants also have one of those golden cats with the arm that goes like this. And the idea behind it, as I understand it, is that that's a sign of, or it's an omen for good luck, that the cat is sort of scraping the money into the shop, and that it will generate wealth as a good sign. And as we're speaking about the sort of magical thinking of purple, I think it's also interesting to accentuate that some of the findings that the purple meme has come upon, for instance, in the realm of plants and of medicine and of combining plants and combining all sorts of food items for health purposes, for instance, or for psychedelic journey purposes, that's also one of the positives of this value meme, is that there's sometimes also an intuitive knowing about the natural world that you can't explain, and that sometimes produces uncannily good results. So I think it's important to both emphasize the sometimes misguided perspective of purple, but also sometimes the magical knowing that that is also contained within that level of development.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. The shaman.
Yeah.
Yeah, the shaman, the medicine man or woman. Yeah. There's also a beautiful, a little bit more of a gender diversity acceptance in a way here. I think there's goddesses, for example, in the purple stage. Goddesses sort of disappear a little bit when it comes to the amber stage, where religion becomes very popular. But I think in purple, there's almost like a freedom also of sexual roles and sexuality itself, because there isn't so much of that, the rational mind or the puritanical ways in which humanity then evolves beyond purple isn't quite there yet. I think red takes things like sex and sexuality to a certain level, where later we'll talk about how blue comes and tries to discipline that and purify it. Purple doesn't still have too much of a sense of that. I think both archaic beige and purple don't have these strict moral codes. They don't have a lot of moral codes in the way we think of morality, which is also, I guess that can take us to the negative side of purple. There is incest in purple. Just like you can sacrifice your child, I think there is incest. There is a sort of no respect for individual rights, certainly. I guess honor codes, you can still see that in places like Afghanistan, Pakistan, where if you have disrespected your clan or your family, you will be killed. Unfortunately, that has happened in England in some communities of like Pakistani families and such. So that's honestly, I don't want to like kind of name certain communities, so to say, or ethnicities or nationalities. But there are some nationalities where this value system is a little more powerful. Iranian stonings, for example, to ward off evil. We have to stone this woman to death. That kind of thing happens in some ways in some communities where there is still a fairly strong presence of purple, more so than you would see in a little bit more of a modern city.
Yes, it's interesting that you mentioned Afghanistan, because in recent history, we've been able to see a large number of value memes interacting with each other. And for instance, we could say that the United States forces in Afghanistan were attempting to impose orange level democracy while battling the blue or amber fundamentalist Taliban. And the Taliban itself originated in opposition to the red Mujahideen guerrilla fighters, which had actually been trained by the United States to fight the Soviets when they invaded Afghanistan in 1979. Part of the US military strategy was to cultivate warm connections with the tribal leaders in Afghanistan of the Pashtun tribes. And the hope was that the tribal elders would speak to the members of the tribe and prevent them from joining the Taliban, which was not always successful. But at least it's interesting to see that the tribal elders or the purple leaders were seen by the United States military as important people within the power structure of Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, indeed. Let's talk a little bit about how we can, as humanity evolves, and certainly most societies in the world have really moved quite far beyond purple, this magical stage, but there is a loss in that as well. I think modernity comes and sort of sucks out the magical enchantedness in our lives. So in some ways, when there is a lot of depression, for example, modern treatment of depression could mean that you're sitting in an office with a therapist talking. But just as a great treatment, in some ways even better than that, could be when you just take a break and you decide, I'm going to go to the woods and I'm going to connect with nature, going to just allow myself to be surrounded by my friends, and perhaps we go camping, or I don't know, the things that we need to do sometimes that are deeply helpful are such as connecting with nature, can really be almost a sort of a connection with that purple sense of valuing our surroundings and our community in that way. And even those little things like magical belief in some kind of a spiritual ritual, there's no harm in any of that, because I think we have logic and reason that we can always return to. But if we feel down, if it feels like a need for belonging, we can actually reach down to purple and find that value system really meaningful and useful.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, I think that's a beautiful way to view the purple value meme. And also, I would add that the enchantment that is present at the purple perspective is something that also has a lot of positivity in it, as you say. And just to be aware of the fact that if we encounter trees in a forest, it is a magical situation that evolution has produced a planet and trees and oxygen and human beings over 13.7 or 8 billion years. And to be aware of the fact that nature has provided human beings throughout history with food and with all sorts of other protection and things like that, just to be aware of how uncanny that really is, and how special it is indeed to be surrounded by living things, and especially if we look at other planets in the vicinity of Earth, it is very exceptional, and to be able to consciously experience the life that we can feel in other creatures and in trees and all sorts of living things. I think that's also a way in which we can inhabit and embody the purple meme.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if we're speaking about integrating the purple level of development into our daily lives as modern human beings, then I would say indeed, as you were saying, one of the ways we can do that is to feel the connection, the profound connection with the land we live on, the earth we're related to. Also to look at life with a childlike gaze, because then we can allow ourselves to be surprised and awed. For instance, a friend of mine, he has a 4-year-old son, and he recently told him about a fax machine, because of course the boy didn't know what that was. And he basically described it as, well, you make a drawing here, you place it or you put it into a sort of machine, and then the drawing comes out halfway across the world, for instance. And the 4-year-old boy, he was completely wowed by the fact that that was possible. And to be able to look at life in that way, it does bring us appreciation. And personally, I always try to be appreciative of the fact that there's running water that I have access to, and the fact that that I live in a house and I'm not exposed to the elements and things like that. So that's also, I think, a way in which we can relate to reality from that childlike perspective of appreciation that is associated with purple.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can't ever really not feel completely bamboozled by, like, you're in Amsterdam and I'm in Boulder and we do this regularly. Yes, there is science that will explain every bit of it, but sometimes I don't want that. I just want to be magically enchanted by so many things that make our lives so much more richer because of that magic of it cannot be explained. My dad actually used to say He was a surgeon, so he used to call himself, he would say, I am a master of the human body. I can open people up, and I can remove things and stitch them back together, and they're going to be perfectly fine. And yet he was a very logical, scientific man. And yet there were times when he would sometimes say, the way the human body functions, just the millions of things that happen constantly, every time, every moment of the day, with every breath, science can't really explain any of that. That's a mystery. So there's the magical mystery of life, and to really connect with that, we can do it every day. So if anyone is listening, I would say, what's one thing that you can think of to bring that sense of magic and mystery and mysticism even into your life that would help you ease into what can seem like a very fragmented world sometimes, to connect with the simplicity and the innocence of this stage.
One of the ways we can integrate the purple meme into our daily lives is also to honor our family members and to honor our ancestors. And as you were speaking about an exercise for people, there's an exercise that comes from systemic work or family constellation work, where you envision your parents standing behind you, and then their parents standing behind them, and then their parents standing behind them. And what happens is it's like you start at the top of a tree and you sort of go backwards. So it becomes wider and wider. And you feel all of the life that has come before you and that has resulted in you. And if you have children, you can also feel that they stand in front of you. So basically you're giving life forward. And that's one of the ways to become conscious of how we're situated as human beings in time, but also within a particular tribe, so to speak, the tribe of our family. And to feel a certain respect and honor for the people who've come before us, and the hardships that they've had to endure, and the wisdom that they accumulated in their life. So I would say that's also a way in which we can embody the purple level of development. And another way is indeed to participate in our chosen tribes. And you and I, of course, we both lead integral life practice sessions for personality type tribes. So that's also a way in which you can connect with people with whom you feel kinship. And the same, of course, also goes for people, for friends indeed, and for work tribes, or colleagues, people with whom you share hobbies, or sports teams indeed, things like that, or music tribes, movie tribes, things like that. So those are a number of ways in which we can feel the purple level of development alive in ourselves as modern human beings.
Yeah, absolutely. I might also just say the speaking of the sort of the negative of the purple stage, at some point, if we hang out in this innocence or this magical belief system for too long, and it doesn't fit anymore, I think we begin to feel claustrophobic, and the rigid rules of the clan can feel very stifling. And I think that is where some individuals in this magical belief system will begin to feel like, enough with all this. I feel like I need to go out there and do certain things, or meet certain people, or whatever, where you feel like this is not enough for me. That's the beginning of the ego, where I begin to feel like I'm separate from sitting around this fire, drumming and listening to this shaman. And that begins the departure from purple and entry into red, which we can discuss in our next call.
Excellent. So then next time we'll explore the red level of development, which is both red in spiral dynamics and red in integral theory. And we'll go into the very energetic express self that arises indeed with the formation or emergence of the egoic awareness.
Okay, well, thank you, Lee.
And thanks, Damali, and thanks everyone for watching.
Yeah, and if you need to contact us, please contact us on practicalintegral.com. And if you feel like you've enjoyed this video, perhaps consider subscribing to our little YouTube channel.
Okay, thanks everyone. Bye.